Daniel Harrington had built his fortune from nothing. At least, that's what he loved to say. He stood in the center of their marble-floored living room, his voice sharp as shattered glass. The chandeliers above sparkled like frozen stars, illuminating the wide eyes of his children, 8-year-old Lily and 10-year-old Noah. "You need to understand something," Daniel said, adjusting his cufflinks. "In this world, money is power. And your mother." He glanced toward the kitchen doorway where Amelia stood quietly. "Your mother has neither." The words hung heavy in the air. Amelia didn't move. She had long ago learned how to stand still when Daniel spoke like this. Stillness was safer than tears. The children looked confused. "But Daddy," Lily whispered, clutching her stuffed rabbit, "Mommy takes care of everything." Daniel let out a short laugh. "Taking care of things doesn't make you powerful, sweetheart. Owning things does." Amelia felt something tighten inside her chest, but she forced a soft smile. "Dinner's ready," she said gently. The argument ended there, as most of them did. Daniel would speak. Amelia would absorb. What Daniel didn't know, what no one in that house knew, was that only hours earlier, Amelia had received a call that would change everything. Her father, Edward Sinclair, had passed away. The name Edward Sinclair meant nothing to Daniel beyond being the quiet, distant man who never approved of him. But to the rest of the world, Edward Sinclair was a titan, owner of a global empire spanning technology, infrastructure, energy, and philanthropy. $30 billion worth of empire. And Amelia was his only heir. She hadn't told Daniel. Not yet. Not because she was afraid. Not because she was unsure. But because she needed time to think. As the children ate dinner quietly, Amelia's mind drifted back to her father's last words to her a year ago. "True wealth isn't measured in numbers, Mia. It's measured in the hearts you lift." Daniel talked non-stop about a new investment he was planning. About partnerships. About expansion. About dominance. The children nodded, pretending to understand. Amelia watched them instead. She noticed how Noah's shoulders tensed every time Daniel raised his voice. How Lily carefully asked permission before even reaching for water. Power. Daniel thought power came from money. But power, Amelia realized, also came from silence. From patience. From waiting for the right moment. Later that night, after the children were asleep, Daniel poured himself a glass of expensive scotch. "You know," he said casually, "I was thinking, it might be time you signed that prenup amendment, just to protect what's mine." Amelia's fingers tightened slightly around the edge of the sofa. "What amendment?" She asked calmly. "Just something that ensures you'd get a reasonable settlement if we ever. Well, you know." She looked at him carefully. Reasonable settlement. The man who thought she had nothing wanted to make sure she'd leave with even less. "I'll think about it," she said softly. Daniel smirked. "Of course you will." That night, Amelia lay awake staring at the ceiling. $30 billion. It wasn't the number that mattered. It was what it represented. Her father's legacy. His kindness. His belief in her. And suddenly, Daniel's words echoed in her mind. "Your mother has neither." Amelia closed her eyes. He was wrong. He just didn't know it yet. The funeral was held privately. Daniel didn't attend. "Board meeting," he'd said, checking his watch. "Send my condolences." Amelia nodded without protest. She traveled alone to the Sinclair estate, a sprawling property, overlooking the ocean, a place she hadn't visited in years. The gates opened automatically as her car approached, as though recognizing her bloodline. The staff greeted her with quiet respect. "Welcome home, Miss Sinclair." She hadn't heard that name spoken like that in over a decade. Inside the grand study, her father's lawyer handed her a thick folder. "Your father left everything to you. Complete controlling interest. Effective immediately." Amelia inhaled slowly. Everything. She signed the documents with steady hands. But it wasn't the billions that made her emotional. It was the letter tucked inside the folder, written in her father's familiar handwriting. "Mia, if you are reading this, I am gone. I know you chose love over legacy when you married Daniel. I respected that choice, even if I worried about it. But remember who you are. You were never meant to stand in anyone's shadow. Use this wisely. Not to dominate, but to elevate. Love always. Dad. Tears slipped down her cheeks. For years, she had minimized herself for Daniel. Let him shine. Let him boast. Let him believe he was the provider, the pillar, the power. She hadn't needed to compete. Now, she didn't need to. When she returned home that evening, Daniel was on a call, laughing loudly about closing a massive deal. He barely looked up when she walked in. How was it? Peaceful, she replied. He nodded absently. Good. By the way, I've been thinking about enrolling the kids in a more elite academy, the one with the billionaires' children. Amelia studied him quietly. You think that's important? She asked. Of course it is. It's about status. Status. She thought of her father funding rural schools in developing countries, building hospitals, quietly paying college tuition for employees' children. Status had never mattered to him. I'll handle the tuition, Amelia said gently. Daniel laughed. With what income? She held his gaze. With mine. For a second, something flickered in his expression. Confusion. Irritation. Dismissal. Right, he said sarcastically. Your cupcake business. She didn't argue. She didn't explain. She simply went upstairs and kissed her children goodnight. Noah looked at her curiously. Mom. Yes, sweetheart. Why does Dad always talk like money is everything? Amelia brushed his hair back tenderly. Because he thinks it is. And you? She smiled softly. I think love is. Noah seemed satisfied with that answer, but Amelia knew something had shifted inside her. She was no longer the quiet wife being told her worth. She was the heir to an empire, and she was about to decide what kind of world her children would grow up in. 2 weeks later, Daniel announced a grand charity gala at their mansion. Major investors are coming, he said proudly. It'll be the event of the year. Amelia raised an eyebrow. A charity gala. Public image, Daniel shrugged. You know how it is. Yes, she did. The night of the gala, the house shimmered with lights. Luxury cars lined the driveway. Crystal glasses clinked beneath classical music. Amelia wore a simple ivory gown. Elegant. Understated. Daniel wore confidence like armor. Midway through the evening, he tapped his glass to make a speech. As many of you know, he began, success comes from vision. From strength. From knowing your value. His eyes briefly flicked toward Amelia. And from not settling. A few awkward chuckles floated through the crowd. Amelia felt Lily's small hand slip into hers. Then something unexpected happened. The front doors opened. A tall man in a tailored suit stepped inside, followed by several distinguished guests. Daniel frowned. Who invited? The man approached Amelia directly. Miss Sinclair, he said respectfully. The board is ready when you are. The room fell silent. Daniel's face drained of color. Board. He repeated faintly. The man turned politely toward him. Yes, the Sinclair Global Holdings Board. They insisted on meeting Mrs. Harrington as soon as possible. Whispers spread like wildfire. Daniel stared at Amelia. Sinclair. He asked slowly. Amelia looked at him, not with anger, not with triumph, just with truth. My father passed away, she said calmly. I inherited his company. How much? Daniel whispered. She met his eyes. 30 billion. The number echoed in the grand hall. Gasps. Stunned silence. Daniel's confident posture crumbled. For years, he had spoken of power. Now, he stood before it. And it wore ivory. The days that followed were tense. News spread quickly. Headlines exploded. Sinclair heiress revealed. $1 billion. Empire passes to reclusive daughter. Daniel tried to process it. You never told me, he said one evening, his voice unsteady. You never asked, Amelia replied gently. He ran a hand through his hair. We are unstoppable now. Together. She looked at him carefully. Are we? He hesitated. For the first time in their marriage, Daniel felt small. Not because she had money, but because she had dignity. He remembered the things he had said. The jokes, The dismissals. The way he'd spoken to her in front of their children. I was wrong, he admitted quietly. The words seemed foreign to him. Amelia didn't gloat. She didn't scold. She simply said, "Power isn't about who has more. It's about what you do with it." Daniel looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. She hadn't changed. He had just never truly seen her. 6 months later, the mansion felt different. Warmer. Lighter. Amelia had established foundations in her father's name. Education programs. Medical grants. Community housing. She involved the children in every decision. Who should we help this month? She would ask. Noah chose a school for children with disabilities. Lily picked an animal rescue shelter. Daniel watched quietly at first. Then slowly, he began to participate. Not for status. Not for headlines. But because he saw the joy in his children's eyes. One evening, as the family sat together in the garden, Daniel cleared his throat. "Kids," he said softly, "I owe your mother an apology." Lily blinked. For what? For thinking money makes someone powerful. He looked at Amelia. I was wrong. Noah tilted his head. Then what makes someone powerful? Daniel glanced at Amelia before answering. Kindness, he said quietly. And courage. Amelia squeezed his hand. Because true inheritance isn't about billions. It's about breaking cycles. It's about teaching children that worth isn't measured in bank accounts, but in hearts touched. And though Daniel once believed he was the most powerful person in that house, he finally understood. The strongest person had always been the quiet woman who never needed to prove her worth.